Chuck Bonnell, Julie Hayden here at 710 KNUS, a little after 3 o'clock. And we're pleased to have with us Michael Fields from Colorado Rising Action, which is one of the groups that's opposing CC. Great to have you, Michael.
Good to be back on.
So we just had a fun hour with Rick Sapkin from Edgemark, who walked into the Lion's Den. He was arguing for CC. And we wanted to have you on to present the other side, although I think our texters and our listeners, not to mention Chuck, did a great job of explaining that. But why don't we have you just sort of start out, because I know you have been going around the state in debates on this issue. So what is it that you would like our listeners to know about Proposition CC, which is on the ballot that everybody has sitting on their kitchen table or in their mailbox right now?
Yeah, so I caught a little bit of that last hour, and I don't know if there's much more to say after Chuck went through all the points. But I think the biggest issue is just, and you mentioned this, the ballot language is so biased and misleading that I am worried that people will pick that up, not learn about it, just read what it says, and say, you know what, this sounds great, without raising taxes, funding these things. That is the biggest concern right now. And I think it really exposes the process that the legislature wants the money and they're able to make the ballot language without any check on that. And it's really, I mean, there's no tabor in it. There's no, it doesn't say permanent. It doesn't say refunds. I mean, it really hides the ball. And so that's what we're trying to get out there and do. And why I think, you know, I was telling people earlier today when I was speaking to get your ballots in and then spend the next 3 weeks trying to get other people to vote the right way on this, because that's my concern is that ballot language doesn't, you know, really say what this is about at all.
Well, and you're right, I think, and that was reflected in, a while ago, there was a Magellan Strategies poll, which is a right-leaning poll, which indicated people seem to be for this. But basically, I think the issue there is they just asked them the straight ballot question. And it does, it sounds nice, well, without raising any taxes, and it will save orphans and unicorns and things.
Well, and it does raise your taxes, it just doesn't raise your tax rate.
Right, it keeps money that you pay in tax. It keeps more tax money.
It keeps more tax money, and you don't get it back. Then they say under strict accountability, which is, they pulled this ruse, 16 years ago. They take the money in, then they'll say, okay, just like they did with higher education C in 2006 and 2007. They said, okay, we allocated out of this money $253 million over to higher education. They didn't say they took $271 million out of the general fund for education. And they're going to do the same thing.
It's a substitute. They're just substituting the money and trying to act like it would be on top of it. And that's why I'm glad Hank Brown called him out on it. And I'm glad, Governor Bill Owens is like, nope, I'm not for it this time. And I think that's the big deal if this is permanent. People that supported Ref C for the 5-year timeout before, some 15 years later are looking back and saying that was a terrible idea. The problem that we have with this is it's forever. And so even if we know what they're doing and if they're substituting that money, we can't do anything about it unless we want to go to the ballot and spend a ton of money.
That takes lots of money, and it takes and no one has money. The Republican Party doesn't have money, neither does anyone else. And so you can go back. Yeah, sure, you can go back.
Well, and Michael, we're talking with Michael Fields, Colorado Rising Action, too. And another thing that really worries me is just the way that right now and, for the foreseeable future, it looks like Democrats are going to control the state legislature, the governor's office. I mean, so it's not even as if, you got Republicans like Pat Neville, Dave Williams up there fighting the good fight, but they're very much a minority. So the Democrat, and as we showed the last legislative session, they're happy to run roughshod over any kind of common sense of Republican. There is no reaching across the aisle going on at the state capitol these days.
No, and I think the point, you got to the point where last hour Rick said, well, these are new people, and we're just going to trust them. These are the same people who passed, the oil and gas stuff, national red flag. We can go on and on. But they've also overspent next year's budget by $100 million already.
There you go.
Right? So the Sun came out with an article and said all these things they promised, all these bills they passed, they have overspent next year's budget. And so as they're promising where this money is going to go in refunds, K through 12, higher ed, transportation, 40% of next year's refunds are already spent by the legislature. And so, we're going to trust the people who are doing that. And the legislator, one of the people on the JBC said, we didn't know what we were obligating ourselves to. We didn't realize what we were obligating ourselves to.
Well, that's good.
That was a direct quote out of it. And so we don't trust them because of what happened with Ref C. There is no guarantee if future legislature can come in, take this money, as a statute and say we're going to spend it somewhere else, or what we were talking about, how it's fungible and they're just going to take it and say, the audit shows everything, is right
went
where
to
it should be.
roads.
Strict accountability.
Our
Strict
roads are
accountability.
better.
Yep.
It's not going to schools. It's not going to higher education. So I think we just shouldn't get fooled on this. And this is the big battle of this year. And they are about it. This is the first step to fully repealing Tabor.
Right.
And it's a first step to raising taxes even more. And they've said that. I mean, you look at the people, they have $4 million rates now. Dan Ritchie, Pat Stryker, all these unions are coming in with hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're people that want to repeal Tabor.
Sure.
Let's listen to them. They called it a rehearsal for future efforts.
Right.
So that's why
Yeah.
it's such a big battle
Right.
this year.
Well, and it's kind of funny. Rick, bless his heart, brought us in. He goes, look at all the people who are endorsing this. But you read it, and it's like, well, Rick, that's not on this radio station, at least. These are the people you look at and say, if they're for it, I'm against it, a kind of thing. And I think, you were talking with Michael Fields from Colorado Rising Action about Proposition CC, which is don't be fooled by the wording on the ballot. What it wants to do is increase your taxes, keep more of your tax money. There's no accountability. There should be, but there's not. And I think, Michael, from the text and the calls we were getting, I think they're, at least from our listeners, facing a really skeptical audience out there. On the one hand, people are saying, number one, we don't believe that you actually need the money. And number two, we don't believe that you're even going to remotely spend it the way that you say you're going to spend it.
Yeah, and I think there's precedent for that, but they don't trust the legislature because, we were told when hospital provider fee fix passed, which I had a problem with, that roads would be fixed, right? And now we have second to last rural roads still in the country after that. Faster fees went up. Ref C was passed. I mean, you can go time and time again on the promises that are made.
Right.
And if these are priorities, why aren't we putting them first in line in our budget, not saying, we're going to take care of everything else, now we need a tax increase in order to fund the things that are true priorities? I think your listeners are very smart. And even the Denver Post came out against this.
Yes,
that they're, called it fatally flawed. When the Denver Post is against it, I'm telling you, we would win this thing hands down if the ballot language was fair at all. I think we can still win it, but it's just a lot harder to get the message out of what this really means.
Well, you're also going to have a problem that they don't have the armies they did for the Governor Polis's one, but if they get to collect the ballots and go to old age homes and tell people with Alzheimer's how to vote.
Well, yeah, and Michael, that's kind of a thing. Talk a little bit about it. It almost seems to me, you look at the names and the money behind the people who are endorsing this, and I'm guessing that the people who are opposing it are like us, right? Yeah, and there's not a ton of money there. Is this sort of a David and Goliath thing, or is there money coming in? Are there places people can go to help get the word out?
There is some. I think, obviously the other side will outspend us given the amount of money that's just pouring in right now. But our side, Americans for Prosperity, has been spending significant money. They're doing door-to-door and, mailers and different stuff. There's another group called Defend Colorado that is out there spending some money on some television ads and digital marketing. The No on CC committee, which I'm a part of, is trying to raise some money to get digital ads out there. And so I think we'll be competitive. The hard part is just they have an unlimited supply of money on that side, and they know that this is that first step. And if they lose this, right, if they can't win a debrucing measure with this biased ballot language, how to get donors to give money towards a future tax increase is going to be hard. But if they pass this, they're going to say, look, Colorado's changing.
Right.
This is we have the momentum going into next year. And so we really want to win this one in order to do it. But it really takes a grassroots effort. I mean, the state party has come out and said that they're against it, but it's trying to get the local people to walk their neighborhoods, to talk to people and say, nope, this is a tax increase and there's no accountability, blank check forever. And so, I'm really curious to see what turnout looks like, in these off-year elections, who shows up. If more
they don't show up anymore.
That's a great thing, but I don't know who's going to show up. So
they don't show up anymore. They collect.
Yeah, people knocking the door.
They don't show up anymore. They collect.
Well, that's a concern I have is again that they're identifying, they being the people who are supported, identifying their supporters out there in the voting base, and they'll be making sure they get their ballot. You know, I want to go back to something you said, because I think that's one of the most dangerous things. The people who support this say, look, it's just one tax increase. It's only $27, right?
It's not a tax
increase. But you know what I'm saying? But they say it's only $27
well, it's
to
up
you.
to $243.
Well, and that all depends on who you talk to. But I think
that's the range of it, what you might get back.
Okay, but the point is that this is, as you indicated, this is just a first step. Rick said, you have these cities and school boards who have sort of allowed to do that, and I think that's different than allowing it at a state level, because again, I think the whole goal here is to get rid of Tabor, which is one of the only reasons I think with Colorado particularly now controlled so much by the Democrats that it's not turning into Illinois or California.
Well, one of the reasons why the other ones allow them to keep it is they don't tend to pay it directly. They get to keep sales tax. It's not like you paid an income tax if you're in a city going, oh, okay, you can keep the sales tax you collected from other people. And so it's a different thing. None of those entities have an income tax, which you'd get a refund on. So it's, I think, I would say absent ballot harvesting, it would lose. But with ballot harvesting, I don't know. I don't know which way it would go.
I think, looking at the governor's projections, is the $1.7 billion over 3 years.
Right.
We don't know how much it's going to be. That could be close to $250 per individual, $650 for joint filers. I mean, we're talking about real money at that point.
Right.
But the state hasn't made a case that they're going to use that money, in a good way or better than taxpayers will. And so I think we just have to keep having that argument of, look, our budget's $32.5 billion. They're saying that these are priorities. The money's not going there.
Right.
But I think, it is a different discussion on the local level. And I think in some localities, people are in a good spot to oppose, if it's in Denver or places that they're going to not use your money well. But, there's some people in El Paso or Douglas and say, you know what, it's going to the sheriff's department or DA or whatever it is. I think it all depends on how the thing is written. Is it sunset? Is it specific or not? I think you're going to have, a very big mistrust for state government, which is true, and localities, kind of battle on battle. And I don't know how those turn out.
Right now, the people in El Paso think it'll go to the sheriff or the DA would not be a happy occurrence of what's going on down there.
But those discussions are healthier on the local level where we don't know, they go into the state budget and it's like our pension system's messed up. So, the governor's making 3 new offices.
Right. We can't even figure out 2 more.
Well, and I think, too, I think his whole part of the whole full-day kindergarten push was exactly in anticipation of CC, one of the things, right? So he knows that you don't have the money to fund. I mean, anybody, the principal's like, we could have told him. It's like, I'm sure Jared Polis figured that out. But this allows him to argue and say, see, everybody wanted full-day kindergarten. Now we got to pay for it.
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately, we just didn't realize how expensive it was. It's like, right.
But they did, though.
Right.
The thing is, they came out with the projections that it's going to be $225 million. And they said, you know what? Wait a minute. We don't have that kind of room in the budget. Let's make it 185.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
We won't use it. And then the projections, and then the actual numbers come in, and it's like, oh no, it was 225. They knew that they knew it, and that's why there's distrust of government. It's saying, look, if they're going to come in, they know the price, they move the number, then they move it back, and they say, you know what? Now they say this refund money is going to go to these other things. It's not true. It's going to go to cover the expenses that they need to pay for last year.
Right.
And that's a huge problem. And I think that's why you have so many people texting and being upset. My whole thing is just, I know, the basis with us on this, it is, can we get to those unaffiliated voters and those people who might not vote all the time to get them to turn out to send this response to the governor and the legislature.
No, I think you're right.
I think it's it's one of those who knows, and therefore your hard work and other people's hard work is really critical, and of course it's just not this one. We've got you got 1A in Jefferson County, which you have support from too many Republicans. You've got mill levy increase in Arapahoe County. You got DD, which is also a terrible thing. But and people say, "Well, how should I vote?" Just vote no. Whatever it is,
just vote no.
Well, these are important elections. It's like they're not next year's one, and those have the president, Corey, and everything else that'll be on the ballot. But these have big impacts on your life. Locally, mayors and city council, school board members. If your school district is going to be responsible or not with the money it has. So I think, you don't get a lot of turnout in these elections, but they're crucial to people's everyday lives.
And Michael, you raise a really good point there. And I know our friend Anil Mathai would be jumping on the phone right now to call up and support you. He says, in fact, these elections, he says, are the most important elections, particularly anymore because we see this is where the Democrats start, right? They start by taking over the school boards. They start by city council seats, which are technically unaffiliated. And they start there, then they bring these people up through the ranks, and all of a sudden you end up like we did in Westminster with like a quadruple size in your water bill. And when you get right down to it, that affects me a whole lot more than Syria, day to day. It's
huge. They not only have candidates for the next offices, but you look at, Aurora is starting to getting taken over by some progressive, city council people.
Right.
But a lot of the big tax increases in 2013, 2011, we shot them down. But Amendment 66, these are billion-dollar tax increases that could change our economy in the state. And fortunately, we voted on them and said no. And Governor Hickenlooper wants to take credit, while he was for president for the great economy. I'm like, you supported 4 tax increases.
Yeah, he also wanted to take credit for marijuana, which he opposed. I'm not sure you get credit or not. But
it's politics. But but on the local level, it's so important to win races. I care about it with my kids going into school and saying, are we going to have good school options? Are we going to have, a school board that's open to charter schools? Because we have a long list, and the ones that are there, I think these are it's crucial and essential that you weigh in on these elections, and you can make a difference.
All right, Michael, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for
we didn't
good work.
Yeah, we didn't. All the texts like you. Sorry, Rick. But thank you for coming on, and we'll have you back too as it gets closer. So feel free to reach out anytime if you think there's something folks need to know about.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Michael Fields, Colorado Rising Action. We can back up to the phones. You're calling.